She walked into her classroom carrying a lesson plan, a warm smile, and a secret fear she never shared. On the morning of October 11th, Redwood Elementary School in Maple Ridge felt like any other quiet suburban campus. Teachers parked their cars in the staff lot, greeting each other with coffee mugs in hand. Students hurried across the courtyard with backpacks bouncing on their shoulders. The sun was soft, the air calm, the kind of day where nothing bad is expected to happen. But for 29-year-old English teacher Elena Morris, this morning carried a different weight. She moved more slowly now. She was 8 months pregnant, and the gentle, rhythmic tap of her unborn daughter had become a steady companion. She often joked with her students that the baby loved poetry because she always kicked when Elena read aloud. At 7:45 a.m., Elena walked into her classroom, room 2B, wearing a flowing beige maternity dress and a sweater draped gently over her shoulders. Her hair was tied loosely behind her head, and her face glowed with that unmistakable warmth everyone knew her for. Students often described her as the nice teacher, the one whose voice felt like a hug. But that morning, something was slightly different. A teacher across the hall later said. She looked tired, not physically, but like something was weighing on her. Inside her classroom, Elena placed her bag on the desk and began arranging the day's materials. There were colored index cards for the morning reading exercise, a stack of graded spelling tests, and a new mug her students had gifted her just a week earlier, a white ceramic cup with tiny flowers and the words "Best Teacher Ever." She brewed a small cup of peppermint tea, a scent that usually relaxed her. She stood by the window for a moment, hand resting gently over her stomach, as if whispering to her baby. She had been counting down the days to maternity leave. Just one more week, she had said the previous afternoon. Then I can rest. But rest wasn't something she had been getting lately, because behind the calm face she wore at school, her home life was slowly unraveling. Her husband, 32-year-old Daniel Morris, had become increasingly volatile. Their once happy marriage was now full of arguments that had grown sharper, colder, and more unpredictable. Staff members remembered Daniel visiting the school twice the previous month, unannounced and uninvited, pacing the hallways and asking if Elena was alone. One teacher had pulled her aside after one such encounter. "Is everything okay at home? He seems on edge." Elena had just smiled politely. She always smiled, but her eyes gave away more than her lips ever would. Still, on that Wednesday morning, she tried to focus on her students. At 10:17 a.m., she began teaching her second graders a short poetry lesson from Shel Silverstein. The classroom filled with small voices reciting the lines, "Listen to the Mussins, child." She laughed softly as the children exaggerated the rhymes. For those few minutes, she seemed like herself again, calm, glowing, centered. When the bell rang for recess, her students rushed out in a lively burst of chatter and energy, leaving behind scattered erasers and half-open pencil cases. Elena remained behind, collecting worksheets and lowering herself carefully into her desk chair. Being 8 months pregnant meant everything required more effort, and she liked using recess time to catch a moment of quiet. At 10:41 a.m., as she organized books on a low shelf near the window, the classroom door creaked gently. Elena turned with a smile at first, expecting to see a late student or a fellow teacher. But when she saw him, her smile faded. Standing in the doorway was Daniel. He wasn't supposed to be there. She instinctively placed her hand on her stomach. A teacher down the hallway later reported seeing him enter quietly, glancing around like he didn't want anyone to notice. He carried no bag, no paperwork, no logical reason to be there. He was dressed in dark jeans and a weathered jacket, his brows furrowed in a way that suggested he hadn't slept well. Elena's voice was low. Witnesses in nearby rooms didn't hear the words exchanged, but several recalled hearing a tense, muffled conversation, the kind that suggested emotions simmering dangerously under the surface. Daniel's body language, as seen on hallway footage, was agitated. He leaned in close. She stepped back. He gestured repeatedly with his hands, pacing in short, sharp movements, behavior that colleagues later described as overheated and unsettled. The argument lasted 11 minutes. Then silence. At 11:56 a.m., the hallway camera caught a small blur. A young boy named Milo Thompson running back toward room 2B. He had forgotten his lunchbox, a bright blue box with cartoon characters on the lid. He pushed open the classroom door without hesitation. Seconds later, his scream echoed through the corridor. Teachers rushed toward the sound. What they found inside would haunt them forever. Elena lay collapsed on the floor near her desk, her upper body slightly twisted, her hair covering part of her face. Her mug was shattered beside her. Papers were scattered in chaotic spirals around her. A chair lay overturned, and one of the classroom posters, a bright ABC chart, had been torn partially from the wall. Her eyes were closed. Her forehead showed a clear impact mark. Her breathing, if she had any left at all, was barely perceptible. And Daniel? He was gone, vanished. One teacher tried to check her pulse, while another called 911. A third ushered crying students away from the doorway. The school went into immediate lockdown. Within minutes, sirens filled the normally peaceful street outside. Paramedics arrived fast, but even they hesitated for a moment. The sight of a pregnant woman, a teacher, lying unresponsive on her classroom floor was almost too much to take in. They worked desperately, communicating in clipped, urgent tones. Check the fetal heartbeat. Get me the stretcher. Call the ER. Tell them it's a double emergency. Elena was rushed out of the classroom on a stretcher, her sweater falling off one shoulder as they carried her. Teachers lined the hallways in stunned silence, many with tears streaming down their faces. By 12:20 p.m., the news had reached the district office. By 1 p.m., detectives were swarming the school. By 2 p.m., the story had already begun spreading across Maple Ridge. A pregnant teacher, found unconscious in her own classroom. Authorities immediately noted signs that this was no simple accident. But that discovery and the search for Daniel would unfold in the next stages of the investigation. To understand what happened inside room 2B that Wednesday afternoon, investigators first had to go backwards, months backwards, into the heart of a marriage that looked perfect on the outside, but was quietly shattering behind closed doors. To most people in Maple Ridge, Daniel and Elena Morris were the ideal young couple. They met in college at a weekend literature workshop, bonding instantly over their love for books. Daniel, charming and slightly introverted, worked in IT support. Elena, bright and nurturing, knew from age 12 she wanted to be a teacher. They married 3 years later in a beautiful garden ceremony where friends described them as inseparable. But inseparable can sometimes slowly evolve into suffocating. In the beginning, Daniel adored Elena's kindness. He loved the way she lit up when talking about her students, and he used to tease her for spending hours handwriting encouraging notes on their quizzes. But somewhere along the way, and Elena's sister would later say it happened very slowly, admiration turned into jealousy. Not jealousy over another man. Jealousy over her attention, her time, her devotion, her energy. Daniel wanted all of her, and the moment he realized she was committed not only to him, but also to her career, something inside him shifted. What started as little complaints gradually grew sharper. You're always at that school. Your job is more important than our marriage. Your students know more about you than I do. Little things set him off. A late meeting, a forgotten text, a night spent grading instead of watching TV with him. And every time Elena tried to reassure him, he insisted he was just being honest. That phrase became his shield, a justification for the emotional storms he brought into their home. By their 4th year of marriage, the arguments became more frequent and more intense. Elena stopped sharing details with coworkers, and friends noticed she had become quieter. Still, she tried fighting for the marriage, believing Daniel was simply stressed from work. Then came the day she discovered she was pregnant. She had imagined Daniel would be overjoyed, but instead of excitement, he looked overwhelmed, confused, almost frightened. He hugged her, yes, but it wasn't the warm, steady embrace she expected. It was stiff, rushed, as if he felt cornered. The pregnancy only intensified his insecurities. He asked her dozens of questions every day. Where she was going, who she was speaking to, why she spent so much time preparing lesson plans. Once, he showed up unannounced during lunchtime at the school, claiming he was just checking on her. But when he saw her laughing with a male co-worker, he stormed out. Elena apologized later, even though she had done nothing wrong. She started hiding things, not secrets, but peace. She hid her stress so she wouldn't trigger his temper. She hid her tears so he wouldn't accuse her of being dramatic. Her sister, Marissa, noticed the change. One night, during a quiet walk, Elena broke down in the car. "He thinks I don't love him anymore," she whispered. "He thinks the baby is taking me away from him." Marissa later told investigators those words haunted her. By the 7th month of pregnancy, Daniel's behavior grew more unpredictable. He'd lost his job due to budget cuts, and instead of confiding in Elena, he withdrew. Then he lashed out. Then he apologized. Then he repeated the cycle. It was a pattern that became disturbingly familiar, a pendulum swinging between affection and aggression. He would place his hand on her stomach tenderly one moment and accuse her of not respecting him the next. Elena began sleeping in the guest room occasionally, citing pregnancy discomfort, but her sister suspected it was more than that. At school, the staff began noticing, too. One teacher saw Daniel waiting near the classroom windows on 2 different afternoons, watching her while she packed up. Another overheard him asking Elena sharply, "Why didn't you answer your phone?" "I texted 3 times. The principal eventually confronted Daniel after he walked straight into the building without signing in. "You need to follow the school's visitor procedures," he said firmly. Daniel nodded, but his eyes told a different story. By the time Elena reached 8 months of pregnancy, her distress deepened. She enjoyed teaching, but it became her only refuge. Room 2B felt like a sanctuary, a place where she could breathe freely without being watched. But even that sanctuary was invaded. 2 weeks before the incident, Elena's colleague found her sitting alone in her empty classroom, tears streaming down her face. When asked what was wrong, she whispered, "I don't know who he is anymore." She admitted she had considered separating from Daniel after the baby arrived, just for a while, to create space, to heal, to think. She wasn't sure she wanted a divorce, but she needed safety. She needed peace. But she never shared that plan with Daniel. Not completely. Only fragments of it slipped out during their arguments. And Daniel seized onto those fragments with panic. He began asking questions that scared her. "Are you planning to leave me? Who are you running to? Is the baby even mine?" That last question shattered something inside her. She told her sister she had never been so hurt. During a prenatal appointment 1 week before the tragedy, Elena asked her doctor if stress could affect the baby. The doctor reassured her, but gently encouraged her to reduce confrontation at home. Elena tried, but the arguments didn't stop. The final trigger came the night before the incident. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices through the thin apartment walls. Around 10 p.m., someone heard something break, a lamp, later discovered shattered in the living room. Elena left the apartment shortly after, taking a short walk to calm down. She returned around 11 p.m., but they barely spoke. She slept on the couch, curled on her side with a pillow supporting her stomach. Daniel stayed in the bedroom. The next morning, he woke up early, showered quickly, dressed silently, and left the apartment without saying a word. Elena arrived at school around 7:45 a.m., looking exhausted, but determined to push through the day. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Daniel had circled the school parking lot twice before entering. Cameras later showed him pacing outside the building for nearly 5 minutes before walking in through a side door. He wasn't there to bring her lunch. He wasn't there to surprise her. He was there because he needed answers. Answers she wasn't ready to give him. And by lunchtime, one of them would not walk out of the building alive. The moment paramedics rushed Elena out of the school, detectives from the Maple Ridge Police Department took over the scene. What they found inside room 2B did not look like an accident, not even close. The overturned chair, the shattered mug, the scattered papers, and the position of Elena's body all told a story that was far more violent than a simple fall. Lead Detective Harlan Cross, a veteran with 23 years in homicide, took one long look around the classroom and said quietly, "Someone lost control in here." The door had no sign of forced entry. Nothing appeared stolen. The only thing missing was Daniel. While paramedics worked frantically at the ER, trying to stabilize Elena and monitor the baby's heartbeat, detectives began reconstructing the final 30 minutes before her collapse. The first crucial piece of evidence came from hallway cameras. The footage showed Daniel Morris entering the building at 10:41 a.m., just minutes after students left for recess. He glanced around nervously, as if making sure no one noticed. What disturbed investigators most was how he walked, fast, stiff, and purposeful. He didn't sign in. He didn't go to the front office. He didn't carry anything that suggested a routine visit. He went straight to room 2B. Detectives zoomed into the footage. His jaw was clenched. His shoulders were raised. His hand briefly reached inside his jacket, though they couldn't see what he was touching. When he disappeared into Elena's classroom, the hallway remained empty for the next 11 minutes. No witnesses, no interruptions, no movement. Then came the scream of the little boy returning for his lunchbox. What investigators needed to know next was, why was Daniel there? What happened during those 11 minutes? And where did he go afterward? Interviews began immediately. 3 teachers, positioned in rooms near 2B, reported hearing the faint sounds of a heated argument shortly after recess started. The voices were muffled by walls and distance, but one teacher, Mrs. Lockwood, said she heard a sharp thud followed by silence. Another teacher said, "It sounded like 2 adults talking intensely, not like a couple having a casual conversation." When detectives asked about the nature of the sound, she hesitated, then whispered, "It sounded like someone hit something, or someone." These statements aligned precisely with the time Daniel was in the classroom. Forensic teams moved swiftly, examining every inch of room 2B. They found a hair strand on the corner of the teacher's desk, a small smear of blood on one of the laminated posters, fingerprints on the broken mug, a faint shoe scuff on the edge of the overturned chair, a dent in the wall near the bookshelf, as if something or someone had been pushed into it. The evidence pointed to physical confrontation. But what really concerned detectives was the position in which Elena was found. Her body had collapsed partially sideways, as though she fell while trying to step away. Her arms were not extended, like someone bracing for impact. Her hands showed defensive marks, small, crescent-shaped scratches that come from raising hands to block a blow. Accident? Impossible. Someone had knocked her to the ground, hard. And the only person in the room during that window was Daniel. Meanwhile, at Maple Ridge Medical Center, doctors faced a terrifying challenge. Elena's heartbeat was weak, her breathing unstable. The trauma to her head had caused internal bleeding. And worst of all, the fetus, a baby girl only a few weeks from entering the world, was in distress. Nurses scrambled around her, adjusting monitors, inserting 4 lines, calling out vitals every few seconds. They worked tirelessly to keep both lives stable. Elena's family rushed into the ER lobby, crying, praying, begging for updates. Her sister, Marissa, whispered repeatedly, "Please save her, please save the baby." Doctors were doing everything they could, but the prognosis was uncertain. Detectives issued an immediate bolo, "Be on the lookout," for Daniel's vehicle, a silver 2014 Honda Civic with a cracked right taillight. Officers checked his known locations, his apartment, his parents' home, his workplace, and the streets around Maple Ridge. He was nowhere. What baffled investigators was how quickly he vanished. The school had only 3 exits, and yet he left without being spotted by staff or cameras. Detective Cross suggested he slipped through the maintenance door in the north hallway, a door often propped open for airflow during warmer mornings. Security footage later confirmed this theory. Daniel was caught for a split second, exiting through a blind camera spot near the dumpster. He didn't run. He walked, calmly. That calmness chilled investigators. People who commit impulsive acts of violence often flee in panic. But Daniel appeared composed, almost rehearsed. This raised a disturbing question. Did he come to the school planning to hurt her? Detectives made their way to the Morris apartment with a search warrant. What they found inside revealed more than they expected. The living room was in disarray, a shattered lamp, a cracked picture frame, a dent in the wall. The signs of last night's argument were everywhere. But what chilled detectives most was Elena's maternity bag sitting by the couch, neatly packed. Inside were baby clothes, a small blanket, a list titled Hospital Essentials, and a printed note from her doctor reminding her of her next prenatal appointment. She was preparing for their daughter's arrival. She was planning for life, not leaving it. But Daniel's side of the bedroom revealed something else entirely. Detectives found a printed Google search. Can stress cause pregnancy complications? Another, charges for hurting a pregnant woman. And one that froze everyone. If a pregnant woman falls, can the baby die? The timestamps? The night before the incident. By 4 p.m., the story hit local news. Parents gathered outside the school, holding their children close. Teachers hugged each other, shaken and terrified. Rumors spread quickly. A neighbor from Daniel and Elena's apartment complex then called the police. She reported hearing the argument the night before, voices raised, objects breaking, a loud bang, then silence. Another neighbor said, "I heard her say, 'Daniel, please stop.'" Still another recalled seeing Daniel leaving early that morning. His face pale, his movements stiff. Each statement painted the same picture. Tension had been building for months. Something snapped. As evening approached, Detective Cross gathered his team. There were 3 possibilities. 1. Daniel attacked Elena intentionally in a moment of rage. 2. A confrontation escalated accidentally but violently. 3. He confronted her, she fell, and instead of helping, he fled. But the evidence, the searches, the witness statements, everything pointed toward the first scenario. And then came the moment that pushed the case into darker territory. At 7:48 p.m., a traffic camera captured Daniel's Honda Civic. Not in Maple Ridge, not on the highway, but 70 miles away, heading into a rural area surrounded by woods, with almost no population and long stretches of isolated backroads. It was the last confirmed sighting of him. Detective Cross stared at the screen and whispered, "He's running." And people don't run from accidents. The courthouse was packed to the doors long before the trial even began. Cameras flashed outside like lightning. Reporters whispered into microphones. People who had followed the story for months came just to witness the moment the truth would finally be dragged into the light. And at the center of the storm was one man, Andrew Lawson, dressed in a suit too big for him. Face pale, eyes darting around as if the walls themselves were closing in. Inside, the air was heavy, not with heat, but with tension. Every seat was filled. Every breath felt controlled. On the front row sat Melissa's parents, her sister, and the principal who had found her body. They held hands tightly, the way a drowning person might cling to anything that keeps them afloat. A bailiff called out, "All rise." The judge walked in, and the trial of the man accused of killing his pregnant wife began. From the first minute, the defense pushed a single narrative. It was a tragic accident. They repeated it until it felt rehearsed, like a script written far too late. Andrew's attorney claimed Melissa had slipped. He claimed she fell against the desk. He claimed he tried to catch her. He claimed he panicked. The jury listened, but their faces showed doubt. Too many things didn't add up. Too many details contradicted themselves. Too much blood, too much force, too much violence for an accident. And then came the prosecution. The prosecutor, a calm but razor-sharp woman named Darlene Hughes, stepped forward and laid out the timeline like assembling pieces of a puzzle. First, she presented the weapon, the metal classroom chair with Melissa's blood on the legs. Then the crime scene photos. Blood spatter on the walls, a pool of blood on the floor, Melissa's broken glasses, her baby shower gift list in her bag, and her ultrasound printout, stained with red. She paused often, letting the images speak. "You don't get this pattern of force," she said, "from someone slipping." Next, the autopsy revealed multiple blunt force impacts. Not one, not two, several. and the angle of the blows suggested Melissa was trying to cover her stomach to protect her unborn child. A few people in the courtroom gasped. Melissa's mother broke into tears. The prosecution wasn't done. They brought in a digital forensic analyst who retrieved deleted messages from Andrew's phone. Messages he thought were gone forever. One of them read, "I'm tired of her controlling everything." Another, "I didn't want the baby. She forced it." The room went silent. One by one, witnesses took the stand. A co-worker testified that Melissa had confided in her about the pregnancy. She was so happy, but she was worried. She said Andrew was acting distant. A neighbor said he heard shouting the night before the killing. It wasn't the first time, but that night it was different. It sounded final. A family friend revealed a chilling moment. "Melissa told me she felt unsafe. She even joked, 'If anything happens to me, check Andrew.' She laughed, but there was fear in her eyes. Piece by piece, the facade Andrew built over months began crumbling. But the most emotional testimony came from Melissa's older sister, Claire. She took the stand, voice trembling but strong. Melissa loved him, she said. Even when he stopped loving her, even when he pushed her away, she still believed he could change. She didn't want to give up on her marriage. She didn't see the danger, even though it was right in front of her. When she stepped down, wiping tears, the entire courtroom felt the weight of her words. Finally, it was Andrew's turn. His lawyer advised him not to testify, but Andrew insisted. He walked to the stand with the posture of a man carrying a burden he refused to admit he put on himself. He started calmly. "I loved my wife. I loved Melissa. I would never hurt her." But under cross-examination, his calm slipped. The prosecutor fired question after question. Why did he delete messages? Why did he unplug cameras? Why did Melissa have defensive wounds? Why didn't he call 911 immediately? Why did he change his story multiple times? Andrew's answers became less stable, less believable, more desperate. Finally, in a moment that made the courtroom drop into absolute silence, the prosecutor leaned in and asked, "Mr. Lawson, if it was an accident, why did Melissa have bruises from earlier in the week? Marks consistent with someone grabbing her too hard." Andrew froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The jury watched him fall apart. That was the moment many believed sealed the verdict. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury retreated to deliberate. Melissa's family waited, their nerves stretched like thin thread. It took 4 hours. When the jury returned, no one breathed. The judge read the verdict. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Andrew Lawson, guilty. Guilty of murder. Guilty of ending 2 lives, Melissa's and the unborn child she never got a hold." Gasps filled the room. Melissa's mother sobbed openly. Her father lowered his head into his hands. Andrew stood completely still. No tears, no words, just a blank stare, like he had become a shadow of the man Melissa once fell in love with. Weeks later, the sentence came. Life in prison without parole. The judge's final words struck like a hammer. You stole a mother, a daughter, a sister, and a child who never had a chance. This court has no leniency for such cruelty. Andrew was led away in handcuffs, expression hollow. For Melissa's family, it wasn't victory. It wasn't celebration. It was simply the end of a nightmare. Today, the classroom where Melissa taught has a memorial plaque. Her students visit it often. Her fellow teachers leave flowers every year on the anniversary. On Melissa's desk sits a picture of her holding her first ultrasound image, smiling with all the hope in the world. A hope cut short, a future stolen, a tragedy that should never have happened. But her story lives on, reminding others to listen to their instincts, to recognize warning signs, and to understand that love should never cost your life.